Bom dia, good morning for those who don't speak Portuguese. Bom, estamos de volta com a aula hoje sobre os refugiados palestinos. So the class today about the Palestinian refugees. And for this class, we receive, it's our pleasure to receive Professor Adnan Abderazik. He's graduated from the University of Michigan at Ann Arbor, where he earned his PhD in sociology and social work. He served at the United Nations as political affairs officer at the New York headquarters. He also served as a senior affairs officer with the UN protecting forces in Sarajevo during the war in the former Yugoslavia. He taught at the University of Michigan, the University of Bethlehem, the Hebrew University, Hind Al Hussein College, and published several books, including 2 books on the refugees' property, the Palestinian refugees' plight, the Jewish quarter in the Old City of Jerusalem, the Zionistic opportunistic use of the Torah, and he has published dozens of studies on Jerusalem, the Palestinian refugees, the refugees' property and loss of this property, the UN and the Palestinian rights, the Zionist colonial scheme, and the dehumanization of Palestinians, and more. And we really thank Professor Adnan for his effort in coming here today. He has been facing several issues related to all the pandemics that we have lately. So it's an immense pleasure, and we thank Professor Adnan very much for this class in advance. Thank you.
Thank you, Arlene. Thank you, everybody. I have a lot of things to say about you and organizing these things. I'll leave it to the end so I can start immediately. My subject, of course, is the Palestinian refugees question. This is not a single shot question. The refugees question has been on the discussion at different on several levels since 1948. Let me start with my presentation. The traditional hostility in Germany, particularly after the revolution of 1848, and the rise of German identity politics, together with historical hostility by the West, were strong factors behind the rise of a new national community among Western European Jews who were an integral part of Western nationalism. This subject is very deep and wide, has been discussed, written by Israelis, Jews, and others in the hundreds. Anyway, we can get back to it if there is need. Herzl, the founder of the Zionist organization, began working on the formalization of a solution to the Jewish discrimination, and in 1896 produced the book The Jews or the Jewish State. He spelled out a conviction that would become the principal statement of Zionism. What was unique about it, that an assimilist European intellectuals, quote unquote, atheists, promoting the notion of Jews removing themselves from their situation. Herzl was initially not totally dedicated to Palestine and was open to the possibility of Argentina as a potential Jewish homeland. When the Kaiser or Caesar of was approached by the Zionist leaders with the bet that Palestine would become outpost of German culture if it were Jewish Palestine. He gave emphatic no, as did the Tsar of Russia. Following the establishment of the Congress, Zionist Congress Herzl made in 1901 a trip to Constantinople to Turkey to the Ottoman capital in an attempt to strike a deal with Sultan Abdul Hamid concerning the Zionist scheme in Palestine. He offered to help the Sultan with Ottoman's debt, but the meeting proved to be fruitless. After failing to buy the Sultan, Herzl turned to British for support, only to be presented with the option of settling in a territory in British East Africa. They offered him Uganda. At the time, Herzl had positively considered his offer, but almost caused a split with the Zionist movement, which he worked hard to avoid. But he died on July 3rd, 1904, before organization insisted on colonizing Palestine. This is clear that the initial thing was not Palestine, was to get rid and leave Europe for Israeli freedom outside Europe. This colonial scheme of the Zionist movement in Palestine advocated that the Bible presented a true historical commitment of God to the Jewish people, including promising them the land of Palestine as exclusively their holy home forever. However, and contrary to this theme of God interfering in real estate matters, contemporary historians, scientists, archaeologists in particular, have been providing solid evidence nullifying the validity of the divine claim and its bearing on the land of Palestine and its native people. Similar conclusions were reached by Israeli new historians such as Frankenstein, Ze'ev Herzog, and others, who argue that the Bible could not have written before the end of the 8th century BC, and that most of the stories it contain lack of all the actual substance. Their basic assumption is that the invented past was an obvious product of manipulative rules. One, it's clear, using God as real estate. Once the Zionist movement closed on Palestine as its target for colonial sentiment in the late 19th century, it shifted to an ethnic cleansing policy and practice pursued by the pre-state Jewish settlement movement in Palestine, and since 1948 by the settler state of Israel. In all the debates within the Zionist movement in Europe, the presence of Arab in Palestine was almost never raised. After all, the Think Well slogan in 1901 in the New Liberal Review Palestine is a country without people. The Jews are people without country, worked well with the Zionist drive to take over Palestine with no people. This is a slogan that worked many years. Many Jews and Israelis and others think that Palestine was empty and the Israelis coming to empty land. At the first Zionist Congress in 1897, he stated, Herzl, for Europe, we shall be part of the wall against Asia, an outpost of civilization against barbarism. Zionism gradually transformed itself into European colonial settler movement, and then after British officially recognized the Jewish national movement, a British colonial movement. They shifted from Germany to Britain. At the first Zionist Congress, in the opening of this book, Professor Yitzhak Beer of the Hebrew University, a German scholar, wrote in 1936, the Bible confirmed their claim to the promised land of Palestine and showed them their special place in the history of nations. Yosef Weiss, who was the director of the Jewish National Fund Land Department, wrote in his diary in 1940, it must be clear that there is no room in the country for both people. The only solution is a land of Israel, at least western land of Israel should be without Arabs. When they said at least western, because some of them, they wanted eastern land, meaning the Hashemian kingdom of Jordan. Abu Sitti, a Palestinian scholar who had written extensively on the refugee question, had repeatedly argued that getting rid of the Arab inhabitant of Palestine has long been one of the tenets of Zionism. He argued that as early as 1940, key Zionist leaders in charge of land management in Palestine had suggested that the only solution to acquiring land for settling Jewish immigrants was to transfer the Arabs from Palestine to neighboring countries. To strengthen his argument regarding Zionist conspiracy to expel the Arabs, he says that almost every one of the 30-odd Zionist Israeli military operations during the war in Palestine was accompanied by a massacre of civilians. Israel's official line of explanation has always been that the Arabs fled voluntarily and they were ordered to do so by their Palestinian Arab leaders. Benny Morris, very known Israeli scholar, that he consider, the new Israeli scholars, but he changed his skin. After second search into the root cause of refugees' flight, concluded that a new revelation indicated that 700,000 Arabs who took to to the road were result of explosion rather than as a result of strengthening of straightforward military attack or fears of attack. Similarly, the new documentation was revealed that atrocities that, and he's saying, quoting, I had not been aware of while writing the birth, his book, meaning who he's talking about atrocities that Abu Sitti was talking about, that Edgar O'Balance, a British military historian who was also visiting Palestine, he wrote, bluntly, the Arab inhabitants were ejected and forced to flee into Arab territories as at Ramleh, Lud, and other places. Wherever the Israeli troops advanced into Arab countries, the Arab population was bulldozed out of in front of them. I don't, and I have a lot of evidence on this, but you know, we have to discuss it because they keep saying the Palestinian, the refugees left on their own. Erken Children, a British writer, investigated the Israeli line of explanation and arrived at the following conclusion. He examined the charge that evacuation orders were given via Arab radio. He reviewed both BBC and United States monitoring units, which monitoring all the broadcasts through 1948. He concluded that there was not a single order or appeal or suggestion about evacuation from Palestine from any Arab radio station, inside or outside Palestine. There are repeated monitored records of Arab appeals, even flat order to civilians of Palestine to stay put. So we and we can go on this subject. In his 2006 ethnic cleansing of Palestine, was very known and very famous book on ethnic cleansing, Alan Pape explores both the mechanism of the 1948 ethnic cleansing and the cognitive and cognitive system that followed the war to forget and enable the perpetrators to deny the crime that Zionist movement committed against the Palestinian people. In the fifth chapter, in his fifth chapter, Pape shows that Plan D, very known plan for ethnic cleansing, that Plan D of cleansing Palestine people. In the fifth chapter of his book, Pape shows that Plan D of cleansing Palestinian people in the fifth, that Palestine was the inevitable product of Zionist ideological impulse to have an exclusive Jewish presence in Palestine. Plan D of the ethnic cleansing was according to him, put into its final stage on 10 March 1948. He provides evidence that the orders to implement the plan came with details describing of the methods for employed to forcefully evict the Palestinians, large-scale intimidation, laying siege to to villages and population centers, setting fire to houses, properties and goods, expulsion, demolishing, and finally planting mine among the rebel to prevent any of the expelled inhabitants for return. Papi provide evidence to show that once the decision was made, it took 6 months to complete the mission. When it was over, more than half of the Palestinians' native population, close to 800,000 people, had been uprooted. 531 villages had been destroyed, and 11 urban neighborhoods were emptied of their inhabitants. Plan D and its systematic implementation was, according to Papi, a clear-cut case of cleansing operation regarded under international law today as a crime against humanity. Of course. Initial number of the geographic and distribution of the refugees. Let's move to the subject of the substance and statistic with the refugees. By mid-1951, UNRWA is the organization take care, United Nations work and relief for the Palestinians. This is UNRWA, United Nations Relief and Work for Palestinians, branch of the United Nations of the General Assembly, was still unable to give an exact figure of number of the refugees. Nevertheless, in 1951, UNRWA reported that there were 876,000 persons registered on UNRWA relief force. They were distributed as follows. Then, at 1951, I'm talking about Lebanon, 106, Syria, 80,500, Jordan, 570, Gaza, 200, Israel, 23, total 875,998. Where and how refugees in Egypt lived. According to UNRWA report in 19, about 1/3 of all the refugees were living in 60 organized camps that varied in size. The other 2/3 living scattered among the towns and villages of the host countries. In 1951, UNRWA conducted a thorough review of the refugees' status in the various host countries. The following paragraph provides a short presentation of refugee status as it was reported by UNRWA. This is very touchy subject for the host countries, particularly the Arab countries, the host countries, how they dealt with the refugees. Is not only initially, some of them that continue the same policy, unfortunate for the refugees. Refugees in Lebanon. Refugees in Lebanon were not granted residence visas and were not entitled to take advantage of the laws of citizenship. They had no political right and no military obligation, but they were expected to conform both to the laws and regulation of Lebanon, as well as to all measures taken for maintenance of peace, public order, and health. All changes of the personal status must be reported within the period allowed by the law. I want to stop here a little bit. This was 1951, the status. As if you read the news and if you are engaged with any institutions dealing with the refugees in Lebanon, today the status of the refugees are worse than were in 1951. You cannot enter to the camp a sack of cement to repair anything. You cannot have anything for repair. You cannot work outside without permission. You cannot move or without permission. Your personal items or identity is subject to the military authority of Lebanon. Today, the refugees in Lebanon are in very bad shape. After 50-something years, they still cannot work in Lebanon, cannot open a store in Lebanon, cannot associate with something in Lebanon, etc., etc. The Syrian refugees. Refugees had no political right and no military obligations. Palestinian refugees residing in Syria enjoys all the civil rights which normally enjoyed by Syrian citizens. They had access to all courts and could sue and be sued. They were allowed to open shops, establish places of businesses, and form companies or partnership either on their own account or jointly with Syrians. Professional men such as lawyers, architects, doctors, dentists, etc., were granted license to practice their respected professions, providing they submitted their documents or qualification. Syria commercial law did not discriminate between Syria and non-Syria. Syrian law did not preclude Palestinian refugees from forming associations and societies or from holding meetings, providing that prior authorization from the competent authority had been obtained. Palestinian refugees were allowed to work in local and foreign. Now, the situation in Syria has changed, not legally. The legal system, as we see, consider the Palestinians as citizens, but not as residents, but not citizens. They gave them all the right as residents, etc. But now with the civil war in Lebanon, we don't have statistics, but hundreds of Palestinians were evacuated from their places. Hundreds were sent to refuge. Hundreds were killed. The catastrophe that impose or settle on Syria, the catastrophe that took place or taken place in Syria has affected every citizen of Syria, including the Palestinian refugees. No discrimination or positive discrimination for the Palestinians. They don't have a break on this. To the contrary, Lebanon refused to get Syrian refugees who are Palestinian. Jordan are the same. So Palestinian refugees has to look beyond Lebanon and Jordan in order to flee the war. Jordan refugees. According to UNRWA, Palestinian refugees in the Hashemian Kingdom of Jordan were regarded as Jordanian citizens. They enjoy the same rights and suffer the same obligations and duties as Jordanian citizens. They voted, they paid taxes, they could acquire property, etc. New laws were presented after 1951 or 50, which made it possible for the Palestinians to obtain a Jordanian passport. This legislative or ordains turned towards complete recognition of citizens for the Palestinians, including refugees residing in Jordan. Refugees in Egypt and Gaza. In Egypt, only a few hundred Palestinians had been refugees in Egypt. They allowed to work. They have access to all counts of law. They were subjected to taxation, and they were allowed to travel freely in the country. They had no political rights, no social rights, no military obligation. They are not citizens, and in order to leave or to come, they need to have laissez-passer. In Gaza, separate from the West Bank, then and now, in Gaza, Palestine mandatory laws remain in force. The mandate, the British mandate, was in the entire Palestine, including Gaza, West Bank, Jerusalem. So the mandatory regulation and rules were implemented in Gaza and the West Bank. But, you know, the West Bank went to Jordan. And in Gaza, the mandatory laws remained in force. But new regulations were, from time to time, issued by the Egyptian administration. These regulations had the force of law. Refugees in the Gaza Strip enjoy the same rights and suffering the same duties and restriction applicable to inhabitants of Gaza. As a matter of fact, the refugees in Gaza, the number of refugees in Gaza is much more higher than the number of local or native Gaza. Gaza today, more than 60% of the populations are refugees. Anyway, freedom of association and movement within the area were curtailed for security reasons. The Egyptian army. The travel outside the area was restricted. Application had to be approved by the Egyptian military government, and only in a few instances, the time of writing the report was the permission regarding granted to any other than only one employee. People now asking, so what's the situation today? Gaza today is separate from the West Bank, separate from Egypt, under, generally speaking, Israeli occupation. What laws are they using? To my knowledge, the Egyptian laws were replaced by Palestinians' laws. When the PLO got into Gaza, they implement or offer new legislative laws. They have the Palestinians new laws or regulations are a combination of Jordanian and British laws. There is no, except for a few, no original or historical laws unique to Palestine. So the laws in Gaza today is PLO laws slash Jordanian slash British. Okay. Now, in 1967, they had the refugees flooded. 1967, it took place war in Gaza, the West Bank, the Golan Heights, and Sinai. This war, of course, triggered refugees to leave, to run away, to to exit their permanent place into other places. This, of course, reshuffled the numbers of refugees in Jordan, Syria, and the West Bank. Displacement of population, including refugees, took place at 3 of the fronts which hosted refugees, namely Jordan, Syria, and Egypt. Immediately after June war, the UNRWA reported that at least 100 refugees fled the West Bank into East Jordan. 16,000 refugees fled the Golan into Syria. 500,000 fled Gaza into Egypt. This is today not the right statistics. Many of them return and many of them resettled in the new places. We don't know. Now, here when I have some statistics. Geographic distribution of registration through and number of refugees who lived on UNRWA. 1971, the total was 1,400. I'm sorry. 1468 people. No. 146,801 in 2000, 137,000 in camps in Jordan in 171, and then reflection in 2000, 180,000 in camps and 16,000 in emerging sea camps. This is where we're talking about 1,000 refugees from the West Bank fled to Jordan. But in any case, as lately, registered refugees with UNRWA, meaning that they are associated with UNRWA in terms of supplying food, schools, services, 809,000 from the West Bank. Some live in 19 refugee camps. 1,400,000 refugees in Gaza in 8 camps. 2,200,000 in Jordan in 10 camps. 475,000 in 12 camps. 552,000 in 9 camps. The Syrian things, you can ignore that because most of the camps were destroyed. Now, I want to go to other subjects. We talked about the quantity and whereabout and those. Let's talk about the right of the refugees. The right of refugees to return. This is Magna Carta. This is the complete total of the title of our problem, the refugees' rights. Refugees' right to return. While the Security Council was more preoccupied with the war, 1948, of course, intensity and consequences between the fighting parties, it nevertheless could not avoid the human tragedy inflicted by the war on the Palestinian people. Consequently, the fate of Palestinian refugees was brought to the Security Council as early as S3 430 meeting, August 1948. After short discussion, the President of the Security Council, this is not in 1948, said that the Council would wish to obtain information from the mediator. Mediator is that was appointed the mediator was appointed by the UN to mediate between the parties to implement 1948. The refugees question, the war, and 1947-48 was a mediator that was going in between to mediate the issues, including the refugees issues. After short discussion, the President of the Council said that the Council would wish to obtain information from the mediator on this question, based on which it will be possible for the mediator to solve the question with the participation of Israeli and Arab authorities. What naive notion of the Security Council then. Okay. The provisional government of Israel claimed that then, with the Security Council, that the refugees left partly in obedience to direct orders by local Arab military commanders, and partly as results of the panic campaign spread among Palestinian Arabs by the leaders of the invading Arab states. By the way, good portion of the refugees, particularly from area Jaffa and this, took place before one single Israeli Arab army entered Palestine. So the cleansing of the Palestinians started before the Arab soldier enter, or what they call it, the Arab military entering Palestine. The provisional government stated that before peace settlement was reached, Israel would be unable to readmit Arab refugees apart from exceptional cases on compensational grounds, as their return would create most acute security and economic problems. There is a historical document by the mediator. The mediator was Swedish Kurt Bernadotte, a humanist, a fair-minded and man of state that was dealing with the question of the refugees. You will see what happened to him. Following this activity of the Security Council and meeting the request of General Assembly Resolution 186 on May 48, the mediator submitted on 16 September 48 a progress report. Is a report very important to remember. A/648 to the Secretary General. This report, one considers the most valuable report on the UN and several and serve and base for the right of the refugees to return to their home. This report considered by the UN, by the Arabs, by many people, as a solid report base for discussing the return of the refugees. Unfortunately, this report cost the mediator, Kurt Bernadotte, his own life. He was assassinated on 17 September 1948 in a Jewish neighborhood in western part of occupied Jerusalem by Jewish gangs led by Yitzhak Shamir, who later on in the 1980s served as Prime Minister of Israel. Yes, Shamir, Prime Minister, assassinated Kurt Bernadotte. The most significant theme of this report could be summarized as follows. He wrote, as a result of the hostility in Palestine, an alarming number of persons have been displaced from their home. From the start, I had the firm view that, taken into consideration all the circumstances, the right of these refugees to return to their homes as early as practical date should be established. And he sent a communication to the Israeli provisional government. He said that without prejudice to the question of ultimate right of the older Arab refugees to return to their homes in Jerusalem, in Jewish-controlled Palestine, if they desire, the principle be accepted that from among those who may desire to do so, limited number to be determined in consultation with the mediator. These proposals of the mediator were rejected by provisional government of Israel. In its reply, Israel pointed out that it was aware of the serious plight of the Arab refugees, but that action taken to deal with the problem on purely humanitarian grounds in disregard to its metro-political economic aspect might even aggravate this problem. In the circumstances of the truce, security consideration alone make it impossible for the provisional government to agree to mediators' proposals. The problem could only be considered by the provisional government when the Arab states are ready to conclude a peace treaty with the State of Israel. It was clear since the beginning. On the receipt of the Jewish reply, the mediator wrote that he had reported to the Security Council on the question, reiterating that notwithstanding the views expressed by the provisional government of Israel, it was his firm view that the right of the refugees to return to their home at earliest practical date should be affirmed. Yeah, well, he said, well, Israel, this is what Israel said, this is what I say. Before the discussion of his report by General Assembly, the mediator was assassinated and his deputy, Ralph, was taken over. So, of course, who was assassinated on 17 September 1948. After the assassination of mediator, the General Assembly debated the question of Palestinian refugees, during which representatives of the United States, supported by major European representatives, succeeded to water down the mediator proposal. Israel did not like it, so the United States and Britain do not like it. They tried very hard to even ignore that. This is why I want to skip the whole dynamic of the General Assembly with the committees, with majorities. The whole process of processing resolution 194 was run by 35 members, led by United States and United Kingdom and France, and 15 Arab Muslim members of the General Assembly. Then the Assembly at its Assembly in its 186 meeting on 11 December 1948 adopted Resolution 194. Paragraph 11 of General Assembly Resolution 194 concerning the right of the refugees read as follows. Resolves that refugees wishes to return to their homes and live in peace with their neighbors should be permitted to do so at earliest practicable date, and that compensation should be paid for the property of those choosing not to return and for the loss or damage to property which under principle of international law or equity should be made good by government or authorities responsible. Of course, it's clear. Those who want to return, they return and compensate for damage. And there is also a clue that damage for the property of the refugees should be paid by the government responsible, by Israel. Anyway. As mentioned above, in this final text of the resolution, the original term Arab refugees of the mediator wishing to return was changed by Israeli supporters, the US and Western powers, to say refugees wishing, not the Arab refugees. And the term earliest possible date to earliest practicable date. The mediator's report wording, which mentioned the Arab refugees specifically, was also struck out of the final text of the resolution. Upon assuming its function, however, the Conciliation Commission, this is a commission, UNCCP we call it, appointed by the UN permanently with 3 members, United States, France, and Turkey, was authorized and sent to as they call conciliation committee to find the conciliation things approach to find a way for dealing with the refugees problem. Upon assuming its function, however, the Conciliation Commission that found that the situation envisaged by the General Assembly was far from the realities of the problem. A large proportion of the dwellings of the Arab refugees had either been demolished or occupied by new immigrants, and their formal sources of economic were not longer available. Anyway, throughout the negotiation with the Conciliation Commission, the representative of Arab states and refugees, by the way, yes, then it was a group of refugees were acknowledged by the General Assembly to be part of representation of the refugees. Unlike today, then a committee of the refugees were consulted or discussed with the Conciliation Commission. Today, nobody asks the refugees what to do with them, unfortunately. Throughout the negotiation with the Conciliation Commission, the representative of Arab states and refugees argued not only that the refugees should be repatriated, but that they should actually be returned to the districts in which their property and lands were situated that read that such properties and lands should be restored to them. The government of Israel, as you know by now, on the other hand, has made clear that there cannot, in principle, be any repatriation of refugees in the sense that the refugees will be allowed or assisted to return to their former homes or villages. Such refugees might be permitted to return to Israel as part of the peace settlement, will be settled elsewhere and treated as a new immigrants who will have to be integrated into planned economy of Israel. If and when some of the refugees were permitted to come back, they will be treated as new immigrants. This is the permanent answer of the Israelis. And this is still considered positive because today Israel would say, what refugees? What refugees? They are working with the American to dismantle UNRWA, the only outfit group organizations that help the refugees in their plight, in their crisis. They want to cancel it. They want to eliminate it from altogether from the UN. I have something else that some other international declaration and conventions, advocates for right of the Palestinian refugees to return to their place often use international instruments other than Resolution 194. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is often used as fundamental safeguard for the refugee right. This declaration was adopted and proclaimed by General Assembly Resolution 217 on 10 December 1948. Paragraph 2 of Article 13 is particularly important in this connection since it clearly stipulates that even if the Palestinians left their country freely, which is not the case, they still have the fundamental right to return to their places. Another related instrument is the International Covenant of the Elimination of All Form of Racial Discrimination, which was adopted on 7 March 1966 in New York. Part 1, Article 5 of this convention stipulates in compliance with the fundamental obligations laid down in Article 2 of this convention, state parties undertake to prohibit and eliminate racial discrimination in all its forms and to guarantee the right of everyone without distinction as to race, color, or national or ethnic origin to qualify before the law, to equity, ethnic origin to equity before the law, notably in the enjoyment of the following rights. The other citizen rights, in particular, too small, the right to leave any country, including one's own, and to return to one's country. There is this subject of the right and interpretation of the right is very important historically, but of course is overshadowed by the politics regarding the refugees. I want here to just to present you with a few things that followed discussion. The Madrid and Oslo Agreement. Madrid Conference, Madrid, 1991, was based in 242 and was not particularly friendly or aware with the refugees problem. But Oslo Agreement was done then. The PLO, I don't want to say the Palestinian, the PLO and the government of Israel is very important, very central to the discussion. Following Madrid Peace Conference, the Refugee Working Group was established in 1992 as part of Arab-Israeli multilateral negotiation. According to Dr. Tamari, a member of the working group, the Palestinian refugees issue was recast in this negotiation not as an exclusively humanitarian issue, but as part of the concepts of restoring the right of self-determination to Palestinian people. Okay, this is what he says about the position of the Palestinian in this group. What Israel thought and talked about is totally different. In view of Dr. Hallaj, another Palestinian member of the working group, the particular allocation of the refugee subject for discussion during the peace process makes it clear that Israel had not yet reconciled itself to the fact that the refugees question is central to the negotiation process, and that while this is national political question, it has nevertheless tragic humanitarian component. This is from Palestinian point of view. The Oslo Agreement, our darling Oslo. The Declaration of Principle, known as Oslo Agreement 1993, between Israel and Palestinian Liberation Organization, deferred the negotiation of the refugees problem to what was called the permanent status negotiation. These negotiations, which would cover the issue of Jerusalem, refugees, settlement, security arrangement, border, and other issues were to take place between Israel and PLO not later than beginning of the third year of interim period in 1994. In 1994, they were very optimistic. They were very optimistic to think that Israel will adhere and continue adhere and implement Oslo Agreement after the assassination of Yitzhak Rabin, the prime minister who signed the agreement with Yasser Arafat. Some people will argue that even under Rabin, the question of refugees will not be treated very fairly. There was a Camp David and Taba negotiations between the Palestinians and the Israelis. Unlike the public perception, which portrayed the issue of the refugees as central to May 2000 Camp David negotiation, the subject was actually suppressed and sidelined this meeting. This was confirmed by Yossi Beilin, member of the Israeli team. Here, the other side of the claim. And then he said, the question of the refugees was never central, and it was not really important. And in an interview with Akiva Eldar, Beilin said that the Israeli view during the Camp David negotiation was that Israel was not responsible for the problem, does not have to pay for it, and the number of refugees who will be admitted to Israel will be some hundreds every year, and that's it. Not our responsibility. We're not behind it. We're innocent. The whole question of refugees is the problem of the refugees, even not the problem of the governments of Arab government. It goes down that it is a problem with the refugees because the government of the Arab government, some of them mentioned the refugees and really not a focused or central manner. There is here something that I would like to share with you. By the end of those negotiations, particularly in Taba in 1920, that followed by the second Intifada, the Camp David was followed by the Intifada because the Camp David was I would say the time where Israel's intentions were clear vis-a-vis the refugees. So people were frustrated on this. But by the end of these negotiations, which were interrupted because of the Israeli general election, the two parties has reached an agreement in principle which would include the 5 points suggested earlier by President Clinton. One, absorbing of the Palestinians refugees in the Palestinian state. Absorbing the Palestinian refugees in the swapped territories. Swapped territories is something that a notion came that Israel will keep some chunk of land from the West Bank in Israel, and they compensate the Palestinians on swap, they call it territory, in some territories, and agreed upon number in Israel itself, rehabilitation where they live, and absorptions in third-party countries. Those are 5 options. I don't know. We did not even reach to this point. Now I want to present to you some unpleasant things when you talk about Palestinian refugees. Scattered all over. And remember when I talked about the status of those refugees in various countries, we did not talk about the social life of the refugees on those places. I had full paragraphs on the social life, destruction of the refugee camps, replacement, etc., shoveling refugees. But I want to mention here the casualties among refugees during those years. Refugees not only paying the price of not only by living, not only paying the price by living, but also living the price by being killed. Casualties among refugees during 1956 war between Egypt and Israel, mainly over Gaza. UNRWA report that in Khan Yunis alone, there were 275 persons killed, 140 were refugees. In Rafah, 300 refugees were killed. In North Gaza, several hundred refugees were killed. 1956 war, the UNRWA was neutralized. This is why we don't have really good statistic, but hundreds of refugees were killed. The first Palestinian Intifada. Between 1988 and 30 June 89, 17 refugees were killed in Gaza, 196 refugees in the West Bank, 244 were injured. Through December 1990, 58 children of refugees were killed. 17,944 were injured. This is the first Intifada. The second Intifada, more than half the 943 Palestinians killed by mid-2002 were refugees. 29 refugee children were killed and 800 have been injured. In June 2003, total of 240 refugees were killed and 915 injured in a military strike on Gaza. According to Palestinian Center Bureau of Statistics, from September 2000 November to November 204, 3,300 Palestinians were killed and 28 Palestinians were injured. Majority of are refugees. Those that have the injured is too bad there because they are bombarding the whole thing. Is the war of 2008-9. During this war, 1,380 Palestinian refugees were killed, including 431 children and 112 women. The siege now in Lebanon. Oh, going to Lebanon. The siege of Tel Zatar. Tel Zatar, very famous refugee camp. It is located inside the Phalange areas. It was very famous in its resistance of the fascists and the brutal Lebanese forces shelling and shooting at the refugees. The refugee camps of Tel Zatar, housing 30,000 Palestinian refugees, was placed under siege in spring of 1976 by the Lebanese forces assisted by Syrian troops and Israeli advisors. Syrian troops assisted Lebanese forces with Israeli attending those attacks. For months, the shelling of the camp with heavy artillery continued, damaging much of the camp and killing hundreds of its residents until the camp surrendered. According to the Lebanese American Association, 2,000 residents of the camp were killed and 4,000 were injured. totalizator. The war in 1982. As a result of the war of the Israeli invasion of Lebanon, 14 Palestinian refugees camps were totally or partially destroyed. More than 30,000 Lebanese and Palestinians were killed or wounded. Majority of those killed were refugees. The massacre of Sabra and Shatila. On 15 September 1982, groups of Lebanese militia and army protected by Israeli occupation forces entered the Palestinian refugee camps of Sabra and Shatila and committed massacres against residents. According to the UN Secretary General, whose team of the UN reached the camps on 18 September, had found many clusters of bodies of men, women, children who appeared to have been massacred in groups of 10 or 20. During the meeting of the UN Security Council on the subject, the representative of Cuba had said the Israeli Nazi Zionist authorities had carried out, together with their fascist allies, the mass assassination of more than 3,000 Palestinian men, women, and children. Those are the only very known, and we are not talking about 20 here, 30 here, killed, 50 here injured. Those are almost on daily life today in Gaza and Jenin and in Jenin and Nablus. Anyway, and I want to thank you for listening to me. I want to thank you for being patient with me. I was hit by very heavy COVID and followed by pneumonia, followed by all kinds of COVID negative effect on my body. I want to thank Irene and the organizers for understand this, responding to this positively, and being flexible with me when and how I can present my presentation. Normally, I don't read this. Normally, I lecture. I like to be in the theater of teaching. Anyway, I wanted to say that in the future, with this group or associated with this group, I am willing, of course, and freely help provide data on not only refugees, property of refugees, any association with the Palestinians, diaspora, Palestinians, atrocities and suffering. Many thanks to you.
Thank you very much,
Clara,
Professor.
many thanks for you.
Thank you, Professor Adnan, for your lecture. Thank you all the students who are here today. Obrigada a todo mundo que está aqui hoje. Vou falar um pouco português, porque sei que parte dos estudantes são brasileiros ou falam em português. E essa aula deveria ter acontecido há algumas semanas, mas por uma questão de força maior a gente precisou adiar, e estamos aqui hoje generosamente com o professor Adnan, que topou estar nesse dia de hoje. A gente tinha essa janela dessa quinta-feira em aberto, e ele generosamente aceitou estar aqui conosco hoje, falando um pouco. Professor Adnan, one more time, thank you very much for your lecture, and I was talking about how wonderful it was to have you here with us today, no doubt teaching us a lot. It's a great pleasure and opportunity to hear from you on an issue as important as that of Palestinian refugees in the context of the diaspora, a reality that is so painful as a result of colonialism and global liberalism that so violently affects different persons and homelands and countries, and that brings up so many questions like historical, cultural, and political issues that need to be debated. And thank you for such enlightening words. It's really exciting for us. And now let's start the moment of questions from the students present in this class. And I will read one of these questions. Just a minute. So, Professor, please. We had a question by Bianca Sotero. She asks, if you believe that real estate speculation, especially in Jerusalem, it's one of the new mechanisms to recreate the Palestinian diaspora.
Say it again.
Do you believe that real estate speculation, especially in Jerusalem, is one of the new mechanisms to recreate the Palestinian diaspora?
Palestinian diaspora, as much as it is now reality, as much as it is, some of them are prosperous and very important groups and communities. Their roots are in Palestine. Their roots are in this tragedy of the Palestinian people. Now, I respect their work. I always was against the PLO or any official Palestinians to dictate for these people, communities and groups what to do and how to do it. They do better and they know better. I wish them success. I think what they would be helpful is work on two levels. One is to connect, facilitate a connection between them, the Palestinians at all, and the local residents, the native local residents of where they are residing. It's one thing is to strengthen the relations, and then also to facilitate some. It depends on the situation, on the ability to maintain a political stance to be fair and just for the Palestinian people. We do not ask any people, anyone, to do anything that is not fair and not right for the Palestinians. And I think the local people, local Palestinians, know better than others what is being fair and local.
Thank you. Okay, Professor, thank you very much. We have other question, and now was made by Hadi Ali, and he asks if you can tell us, it's a delicate question, if you can tell us a little bit about the Havara Agreement and the relationship between Nazists and Zionists.
Between what?
Nazists and Zionists.
Okay. Very heavy question. Roots of both are different. The Nazi roots is more historical, local development of ideological groups, etc. The Zionist thing is covered by the Jewish question. When you're covered by Jewish question, it's difficult to determine the exact source of their racism. We know from our experience that the racist approach toward the Palestinians was not accidental, was deep-rooted into the original colonial plans of the Zionist movement, meaning the colonial plan of the Zionist movement went to the path of racism for their purpose of taking over Palestine, covered by Jewish question and so Jewish suffering, Jewish history, etc., etc. The racist movement of the Israelis is real racism. Is real. It's not theoretical, but it is mixed sometimes with the Holocaust issue, some other with the anti-Semite, anti-this. No, there is pure racism, Jewish racism, Zionist racism against not only Palestinians, but in our case, the Palestinians. And we have to be clear, even at your end and others, to be able to explain that racism is different than defending Jews and Jews' rights. We know historically, I said that in the beginning, Jews suffered in Europe, not in the Middle East, in Europe for generations. But the solution that they found to exit or to get rid of the suffering is to smash, to avoid, to deny the rights of others, but with active acts of violence against those people. This is the racist thing that the Zionist movement did. Not the discussion among themselves what to do with the Jewish suffering, what to do with this Holocaust, what to do with etc. etc. The Nazi thing is different. Is ideologically came out of local perception and needs. It is not unsimilar with the fascism, but we know, for instance, the Mussolini fascism and Hitler Nazism, those are two different things. Okay, for us, it's not Nazism, it's racism. Okay.
Okay, Professor. Important speech about, and thank you very much. Because the time, I think we have many questions, but I think it's not possible. I will not be able to do all the questions. So I'm going for the last questions, and is do you believe there has been a conscious policy of artificially dividing the Palestinian from refugee issue to create the idea that it would be possible to solve the issue of Palestine without granting the refugees their legitimate rights? Wouldn't it be more correct to say that Palestinian issue is inseparable from the issue of Palestine? They are one and the same? If you need that I repeat.
Can you summarize it in one sentence?
If you believe there has been a conscious policy of artificially dividing the Palestinians from the refugee issue to create the idea that it would be possible to solve the issue of Palestine without granting the refugees their legitimate rights?
I see, understand this. Okay.
And she continues, wouldn't it be more correct to say that the Palestinian issue is inseparable from the issue of Palestine? They are one and the same?
So far, from Palestinian point of view, There is no solution to the Palestinian question without the solution of the refugees problem. For two reasons. One is in principle, the right of those people who were kicked out of their country to go back to their country. The principle of give those people the chance. This is one in principle. Secondly, this is the one in principle. Secondly, in practice, today, there is no any Palestinian political movement who can ignore the question of settling the Palestinians question. We had, particularly in some countries, the need to disengage with that country and to find a solution for the Palestinians before you find a solution to Palestine. The situation of the Lebanese refugees, for instance, more urgent for me as Adnan as this than the creating of Palestine. However, you cannot talk about creating of Palestine without talking about the refugees in Lebanon, as all those refugees. There was no Palestinian attempt to separate them. The attempt is by Israel and its proxies, its friends. This is like Trump, let us get rid of this question of the refugees, and then we can have solving the Palestinian question. This is an illusion. This is an illusion, and this is anti-Palestinian ideas. The idea of solving the Palestinian issue. And by the way, those who want to separate the issue between refugees and Palestine, they do not provide any serious solution to Palestine without the refugees. So what at the time of Trump, who was with Israel attempting to eliminate UNRWA and to demolish UNRWA group, they did not give, first of all, they did not give a solution to the refugees. Secondly, they did not give solution to Palestine. It's an illusion. There is no such a thing, Palestinians without refugees, without Jerusalem. No such a thing from Palestinian point of view. If somebody has an illusion that he can that he can create Palestine in the sky, in somehow one of the stars, without taking into consideration the refugees, no any single political body among the Palestinians would agree to separate the question of the refugees from the question of national rights. Palestinian rights is part of the national rights.
Thank you very much, Professor. I think now we are closing our class, and I will call Professor Arlene for the final considerations. But first, I would like to remind all the students that the certificate will be sent by USP in the end of the course, only for those who are subscribed and with 75% presence in the classes. So don't forget to fill out the forms in the chat. We will close the form as soon as the class is over, so shortly. And if you have any inquiries, please contact us via email. And we hope to see you next week here on Tabla's YouTube channel. Please, Professor Arlene, Professor.
Thank you, Claudia. Thank you very much for that. Adnan, well, thank you immensely for your very elucidative and in-depth analysis of, whole saga of the Palestinian refugee issue. And every time I say the Palestinian refugee issue, I feel a bit bad because it's as if we were separating this issue from the issue of Palestine, and which your last intervention made very clear that we can't do that, that it's useless, it's wrong, and that those who do it not only do it wrongly, intentionally, but they are also those who are not capable and not willing to bring any answer for the issue of Palestine. So yeah, that was very clear for me at the end. Thank you very much for that, and for everything else. Yeah. And again, thank everyone who is here, the whole team, Tabla editor for hosting us, for helping us throughout, and wishing you a safe trip back to Jerusalem, Professor Adnan.
Yes. I'm questioning whom I would be if not you from now to on. Anyway, Irene, thank you. I told you last time that we love you. I keep telling my wife and children we were lucky to have people like you, and personally to have you being patient with my situation. You are always with your anybody else you want. Be our guest in Jerusalem. We have pretty large house, and we can host you home. We can host you anywhere. You, your family. But I hope that I'll be recovering soon, so I can take care of you.
It's
You
very,
guys.
very heartening to hear that. And for sure, I'm sure the whole team and several students here will be very eager to go to Jerusalem as soon as possible. So yeah, very, very nice to hear that. Thank you for such a warm invitation.
Okay. Have a good day. Good continuation of the course. Anything you want in this the course or others, I'm ready to help. I found it very enrichment, very warm experience working with you guys. Take care of yourself, and many thanks.
Thank you.